All right, good morning. So I want to continue on with discussion of some of my favorite games. Again, I think I've kind of discussed this quite a bit in doing a actual review of the book, a book look. I went flipped through the book, talked about it. I talked about my experience with it in 2017. I had the first edition US release, I think was 2016. I don't recall exactly. Anyway, I ended up gifting that and later purchased their second printing, I think under Free League. This is the Free League version. Um, so my first time as a GM of Symbaroum, locally, 6 sessions was with the first printing. Um, and of course, it had some translation, issues, etc. But aside from that, if you're experienced and you understand the game from the first page to the last page, you can recognize where something needs to be corrected if there's a strange rule, right? So great. And again, I treated it very much like it presented itself, dark, gritty, deadly. I believe is actually how it's described on the webpage, and I'll read that here in a second, because one of the things that I'm most there's a couple of things that make Symbaroum special for me. The setting, the and the art are consistent, right? I think the same artist does almost all the artwork for every book, everything, and there's something very special about that when you can have that kind of coherency, right? Um, and it inspires kind of a certain flavor of fantasy, right? And it sticks to that. It never divulges, it never regresses or tips off in a direction that it's very clear what kind of world, what kind of thing we should be in and presenting. Hopefully the players get that, etc. So I first appreciated that. I don't really care what dice it uses, right? I don't care if it's a dice pool. I don't care if it's a D12. I don't care if it's a D6. I don't care. I don't care what the actual mechanic for deciding the fate of a challenge is. It's we always seem to be focused on, well, the D20 is the thing. Well, there is the D20 formula that looks like old Dungeons and Dragons. There's also D20 games that don't, right? This happens to be one. There's two D20. So how we decide probabilities and the fate needs to be completely system dependent. So if I'm going to pick a D6, all of my rules better fit into the formula of that 16 percentile probability. And how is that going to affect the quality of the beasts, the quality of the dangers and the challenges? So, of course, when we have a very small window of numbers to choose from, there is a particular style of game that's going to come out of that. We're gonna see that tonight when we play those Dark Places science fiction. It uses a D6 and a very simple success, partial success, or failure outcomes. Very simple. So everything has to be in that window of what we're doing. Okay, so again, this uses a D20 roll under formula, rolling under attributes, or attributes max out at 15. You can never be higher than that. So there's always that 25% chance of failure. So the best you're going to be for the most part with modifiers could be 100% success rate, right? A +5 added to my 15. Quickness gives me a 20. I can only really fail on a 20 roll, so it's a 5% chance of failure always. So there's never really a 100% chance. If you already have a chance that easy, wave the die roller in. It's player facing. Okay. But one of the things I appreciated about the first, if I can remember originally the first book, I can't recall exactly. Of course, it's been a long time. But this book, flipping through it again, it never defines itself. It never says this is grim, dark fantasy. It never says this is a particular style of fantasy. It does describe the Davokar. It does describe the world where the humans come from, what the weight of ruin the humans leave behind as a destroyed country, destroyed world, crossing the mountains into the future, hope, and facing the Davokar, right? So it describes and sets up a brilliant setting, sets up a place. It doesn't limit, what characters can be. They can be humans, they can be goblins, they can be ogres, they can be changelings. So we have a really diverse and completely different style of fantasy compared to say the traditional D&D, where you're humans, elves, dwarves, halflings. Now, of course, I know D&D has expanded many options for your races and classes. So there is really no class structure. There's archetypes that they provide in the book as an example. So you can quickly grab an archetype and just get to work, or you can build your character utilizing those archetypes as ideas. And the other great thing about this particular, again, well, I'll talk about that in kind of a bullet point system, but let's go to their website and just read. Again, to give you an idea, one of the things I did appreciate is it really doesn't say it's grim, dark fantasy. It doesn't define itself. It's defined through reading the system. It's defined through reading the culture. It's defined through, but it doesn't really state how you should be going about this thing, right? Obviously, it's lethal. It's dangerous. But I think it's fascinating that they avoid the trope of describing itself as a particular type of fantasy, which is kind of interesting. Now, again, let me read their. So this is on their website, Symbaroum.com. Symbaroum is a fantasy tabletop RPG often described as dark, gritty, and deadly. It doesn't. They don't describe it. They don't tell you what it is. It says it's often described that way, and that's 100% how I would describe it. But it's very careful not to kind of pigeonhole itself as, well, this is exactly what it is. It was first released in Sweden in 2014. It translated to English worldwide release in 2016. Yeah, and I believe I had it in. I purchased the first edition book from Amazon, I think, in 2017. So that was what I had and ran before I gifted that. The game has captured the imagination of an ever-growing number of gamers, and today the game line encompasses a dozen hardcover books, along with several support products in the form of card sets, maps, and more. Symbaroum rule set is a D20 roll under fully player-facing system designed to be quick, punishing, and easy to get into. And I would agree with every one of those statements. Also, it is flexible and modular. So those who want more complexity, often numerous optional rules, and can easily introduce their own house rules. And this is true. I think this is true of any game, really, honestly. Some games are so mechanically devised that you really can't tweak them, or you break how the game is meant to function, right? But I think a lot of games are fairly easy to tweak, especially if you're a veteran. The game is also flexible when it comes to what type of games it facilitates. Action and or intrigue, done it, ditto. We've done this in our campaigns. One-shot scenarios, I haven't done that. I ran 6 scenarios for my local group, and we have been rotating GMs, and we've had some continuity in our campaign, but technically every time we rotate GMs, they're one-shots, right? We just have continuing characters. We could call these the Symbaroum Chronicles because it's a continuation of characters, but there's not like one theme that's running through the game. A long adventure campaigns, serious stories, and furious fun. And I would argue all of those things. However, one can argue that the flagship of Symbaroum is the acclaimed 6-part adventure chronicle, The Throne of Thorns. I've never seen it. I've never read it. I do believe part of the Throne of Thorns is either in the GM kit, or it might even be in. No, the Promised Land is the sample module for the core book. I'm not certain if I own Throne of Thorns, unless part of the starter box has it. But so I completely have no idea what that is, so I've never used it. Each of the standalone but interlinked episodes are not offer a massive adventure. They also introduce new lore, setting information, equipment abilities, and optional rules. I'm not familiar at all with the modules for Symbaroum, as I don't purchase modules. I don't use pre-written material. I use the core book, and if the core book implies certain things, I try to stick to that, and then we build from that our own version of Symbaroum. And this is how I like to run all my games. If a book comes with a setting and it comes with a thing, then yes, I'm gonna stick to it. And yes, I believe that's how all the players should have the same resource available. So Hollow Earth Expedition's a fine example. It starts you off with a great narrative story and description of the world in that time period. And Hollow Earth sets up so we're all on the same page, right? Symbaroum, again, a game that is self-contained with this ideas are all fine. You don't need to buy anything else, in my opinion. So that's kind of how that describes itself on the website. But nowhere in the book is there one of these kind of descriptions, right? I mean, where it says this is a grim, dark fantasy, etc. Now, obviously, I would agree. You can't read through this and not sense the danger and the mystery and the evil that lurks about in the Davokar, etc. So I want to talk about that. All right. Now, so why is this one of my favorites? Well, I've already kind of talked about that. The consistency of the rules, the consistency of the setting, the consistency even of the artwork. But first, for me, big one, setting, right? Second, the options players have to create their own unique character. And again, this isn't about power gaming, but it allows you to really sculpt your own ranger, sculpt your own wizard, your own whatever, right? And XP is spent directly to improve your character in very simple but various ways. You can just tweak up an attribute. You can purchase another a degree of something you already have. Like say I'm a shield fighter at novice. When I build my character, I pick that as one of my main traits to start. Shield fighter, that gives me certain bonuses for combat. An effect on equipment, or equipment effect. I have an effect on shields because I'm trained with shields. So there's a mechanical effect. And then, of course, when I level up, for instance, I get enough XP to spend. I can go to the next degree of shield fighter, or I could purchase another ritual, or I could, right? So you can really just kind of sculpt and fill out the quality of your character's abilities and what they are, right? Further honing them into a specialist, or diversifying them into a jack of all trades, gaining more and more spells, rituals, whatever you want to call them, right? Okay. And of course, there's some limitations and some racial traits that come from choosing a goblin or an ogre or a changeling. All of them have their own kind of lore and idea of where they come from, and what their role is in the world of Symbaroum, right? Okay. And that's a big deal because we have the ability to improve, but because of the way it handles hit points, the game stays interesting. It stays lethal, and I love that. And I think because it does have a hit point type concept, toughness points, unlike, let's say, wound-based games like Savage Worlds, because of how wounds are utilized. Savage Worlds always maintains a certain integrity of danger, right? Depending on whether we're choosing pulpy or we're choosing gritty. You know, Savage Worlds can be sculpted. But the point is, games that use wound systems or have a guaranteed limitation, I think also stay very dangerous. I think Traveler damage, if I remember right, comes off of attributes. Well, obviously, if your attributes can only be so high, there's a definite limitation to the longevity of a character in a game like Traveler if you keep getting shot, right? Or you crash land on a moon, right? The damage you take. So in that sense, it feels like a kind of a fantasy D&D game, but is greatly focused on the it creates a very it keeps it grounded in the sense that this is a dangerous world, and your abilities and how you handle the problems, the player decisions are based on the competency of your character and his abilities, but they are still wide open to be waylaid very quickly. And so I really dig that. I like the fact that the core rulebook talks about using interludes to kind of set up the tone, and interludes to describe time, or interludes to describe what's happening, what is happening in the world, etc. And then we roll into scenes, and scenes are where we're interacting. Scenes are where players are going to either be in combat or bartering or traveling, or something in which we're now in a live game. So interlude, as I tell you the 3-month journey to get to this point. And you arrive at the gate of Thistlehold, and the commander of the guard barks, "Halt! Who are you? What is your business in Thistlehold?" Now we're in a scene, right? And that from that scene can be just role play with a couple of persuasion checks, or it can be just the matter of factly paying thistles to get paying gold to get into Thistlehold, whatever. From that conversation, right, scene resolves, and maybe an interlude describing Thistlehold to the players as they enter Thistlehold for the first time. And then scenes are created, but either by the GM or by the players. The players can create a scene by saying, "I want to go over and talk to that blacksmith. I would like to get my shield fixed." Boom, that's going to create a scene in which we're going to have a dialogue, etc. Player facing is huge, right? The players make all the roles. It's big for me. I love this because it frees me up to describe. It frees me up to facilitate the game in another way. And it really gives the players a sense that they are calling the shot. They're making the shot call, right? They're calling up their persuasion. They're calling up their ritual. They're, in a way, invoking what's going to be done, right? Now, obviously, if they present themselves in a first-person role play with a blacksmith saying, "Hey, I want my shield fixed for 3 shillings," that may require me to say, "3 shillings, nah, nay, I don't work for less than 7 shillings. We get a barter going via role play, and that's going to activate a persuasion check, right? The player could say, "I'm going to try persuasion, 3 shillings," and rolls the dice, right? Or I could say, "Well, wait a minute, 7 shillings, you're going to need to make a persuasion check." But player facing implies the players have a little bit of say in how they want to activate that. We haven't been playing it quite like that. I think we're all so experienced first and almost habitual in how we've played our whole lives that we're not quite as I think we don't quite reach out in the player facing way that I think the game would allow. It would be flexible enough to allow. However, the game could function quite literally in a traditional manner where the GM calls all the shots, calls up what you're doing. You say what you're doing, you embrace the and the GM can call those shots up. I do like the fact that in a player-facing game, David could just flat say, "I'm gonna tell the blacksmith to fix my shield for 3 shillings," and makes the persuasion check, right? And I tell him modify that by his resolute, which is a +2, right? That makes sense. I don't think many people play it quite like that. That's pretty tough, right? That's it goes kind of against the style of having a GM at all, so to speak. So those are the things in a way, setting consistency in the rules, the roll under a players roll all dice, roll under system, the quality of the math work done. I don't find broken things. I don't see where the math bloats. I don't see where we find out when I'm flipping into some of these rituals that gain advantages as they level up. We're not seeing math problems arise. Everything stays within the D20, so we're not concerned about adding +5 to the dice rolls. We're not going to be at level 16 adding +5 strength, +5 level cap. So adding +10 to a D20 roll just to make the same percentage number. So when people argue with me, what is wrong with traditional D20 games? The fact that as we level up, the probabilities don't change, the numbers change. What's the point? Symbaroum says the probabilities don't change. So why are we going to keep improving the math? If I'm trying to hit armor class 30 at a level 15 fighter and I'm adding +10 and I still need the same probabilities to hit the dragon with an armor class 30, what the hell's the point? It's probabilities. Symbaroum just says these are your probabilities. This window stays right here. The difficulty is going to adjust your attribute up or down based on the quality of the opponent you're facing, right? It has armor soak, which I greatly appreciate. Armor soak for creatures, damage for creatures are set. The GM doesn't have to make dice rolls for those things. They're set, so the GM already knows how much damage they're going to do if they strike the enemy. The enemy gets to make a variable armor check, which creates variable damage. Great pain threshold concept. When you are hammered in one blow, half your strength, you are knocked prone. A player can choose to go to the ground, or a player can choose not to go to the ground, but they will suffer some kind of negative, right? You can get knocked back or you can get knocked prone. And these things really show how forceful a blow was, right? So if I'm an ogre with a 15 strength, the highest I can have, and I'm in battle with a giant world serpent, and it strikes me with all of its force and causes 10 damage, that will knock that ogre on his butt, right? Or the player can elect to not be knocked down, but gives an advantage or goes into a disadvantaged state, etc. So these are game mechanics that 100% suit me. And again, I don't care if you're using a D10 or a D12 or dice pool, whatever the case may be, the probabilities stay right within a window of numbers in which your character is relevant to the thing, and we don't have to sweat this idea of more and more numbers, more and more numbers, more and more numbers, right? What is the point? It's all relative. So when I'm at level 15 fighter fighting a dragon, it ends up to be, it's relevant. It's no different than when I was a level 1 fighting a hobgoblin. I mean, what's the point? The probabilities are the same. So this is where D&D over the 50 years of its progression into second and third and Pathfinder and 4 and right, it in my opinion, Symbaroum is what Dungeons and Dragons should have been, or it's what it should have evolved into, right? Keeping it lethal, keeping it interesting, and allowing players to sculpt their powers and their ability, their competencies, right? And face creatures that will challenge the group, right? Okay. The other thing I really appreciate about it is it sets itself up as a simple, you can do something simple as treasure excursions, but makes clear in the first pages about political intrigues and allying yourself with the Queen or allying yourself with the Iron Pact, creating opportunities for varied play, not just dungeon crawling, not just hex crawling, but a myriad of types and styles of campaign, right? So here's what's interesting though about the core book, Free League, second edition, I believe this is known, second printing or something like that, core rule book. This is Free League. This is when they were, I think, became a subsidiary maybe of Free League. I can't recall. But this is what's fascinating. The Promised Land module starts on page 236 of the core book, and they have this literally 2/3 of page 237 of the Promised Land is called is a 2-column narrative tutorial. And in my opinion, this narrative tutorial should have been in the very first pages of the book. The narrative tutorial, the rules of Symbaroum are easy to use once you have learned how they operate. Basically, the player character has 8 attributes with a value between 5 and 15. When faced with a challenge in the game roll, the player must roll a 20-sided die. In order to overcome the challenge, they must land on the figure which is equal to or lower than the number of the value modified by the so it in 2.5 a page, 2 columns, it quite literally outlines what Symbaroum, a rule set, etc., is all about. And in my opinion, the narrative tutorial section of this book should have been quite literally in the first pages. I would have launched this book with this information. It shows up all the way back here in the Promised Land module on page 236. And the irony of ironies is I don't use pre-written material. So I've never read Promised Land. And I'm flipping through this before I do my video today. And I see this narrative tutorial and I read it. I'm like, holy shit, this should have been in the first pages of the Symbaroum core book, in my opinion, because it tells you what this is all about. And I have enjoyed now, I would say 22 sessions, on average 2 hours a session. So I've enjoyed about 50 hours of Symbaroum in total, mostly as a GM. I've got maybe 10 sessions under my belt as a player now, and I've got about 12 or 14 as a GM, and I've enjoyed every single one with 2 different groups. One I GM'd completely just a local group. I was the GM only for my local players. A phenomenal experience, and we never got to Davokar. We never even got to Thistlehold as they were traveling from the Redina up through Thistlehold. And when I created my character for our online campaigns, Tarot, I actually based Tarot on maybe an NPC or a character that would have been with that group of guys, right? That were leaving home in Redina and traveling up through Corinthia to get to Thistlehold, so they could then embark on their excursions into the deep and dark Davokar. And so in a way, that was when I created Tarot, I was thinking, you know, he would have been one of those guys in that group that would have made the long trek up to Thistlehold. And so a continuation in my head of where Tarot came from, right? Redina as a ranger. I can't, and I know this is a pretty vague video, really, but mechanics, I've said it before, system matters, mechanics matter. But when it comes to probabilities and it comes to challenges, every game has them, right? Every game has a reason you flip a coin, roll dice, pool of dice. They're all about probabilities. They're all about difficulties, right? You got a 25% chance to pick this lock. You've got a 75% chance to pick this lock. Whether I'm doing it on the D20 or I'm doing it with a percentile die or I'm doing it with a deck of cards, whatever the probabilities are. So there is a real fascinating, we have a fascinating habit in this hobby of making assumptions that the actual mechanic we use to solve the challenge of the probabilities is what the system is. And a D20 is not a system. A D20 is as Anthony likes to put it, a discount D100, right? Every number counts as 5%. But the point is, it allows a probability of percentages, right? It's very simple. D4 is 25% probability, right? D6 is 16.7 probability. D8 is, what is D8? I can't recall now. D12 is 8% probability. D10 is a 10% probability. D20 is a 5% probability, right? D12 is I can't remember what D8 is. D8 is I have to do the math in my head and forget it. We'll be here all day if I do the math in my head. But the point is, the reason you need a certain window of numbers is based on what can occur in the world. Like a D100, right, gives us a lot of points on that die to determine the value success probabilities, right? Versus the D20, we only get 5-point steps. So you're still going to have this problem of adding numbers to the math to get to the dragon, right? Symbaroum solves that by saying, nah, you're going to have attributes that are between 5 and 15. You're going to face creatures that will have a -5 effect or a +5 effect, depending on what you're doing and what attributes they have. And that's going to create a 20 on the number. It's going to create a 0 on the number. everything stays in this beautiful window. The damage they do, the special abilities the creatures have, those are what make the game deadly and dangerous, even if you're a pretty stout warrior, right? But there's a level of competency that we're seeing even in our campaigns that we were out of the gate pretty competent warriors, depending on what we were doing, or pretty competent spellcasters. We could utilize those things strategically. Shig utilized his abilities strategically to aid the group, and Malleus with his weapon skills, right? And Taro with his fighting ability, his quickness, and his polearm gained advantage in every combat to get the first blow. And it's great, right? It gives us strategies and tactics, and of course a myriad of people. Shig was a goblin. I and David play humans. Cabela's playing a human, and Shig, of course. I mean, Dale has also played a changeling. Big Lug was a ogre, or is an ogre. He still plays with us. We just haven't seen him at the table in a while. And of course, originally Justin was playing a barbarian. So great stuff, and it creates this vast, diverse set of cultures and races that fit into the small window of Symbaroum, right? Vast but narrow, in the sense that there's only a handful of races, only a handful of subcultures, so to speak. So we have some diversity without it getting way out there in high fantasy, right? And I would argue, again, we've had sessions that have been, I would say, dark and grim dark, and we've also had sessions that felt like, fairly traditional fantasy, right? And that's what I like about it. But it never flavors into the high fantasy. It never flavors into the super heroic. It never flavors into the upper echelon godlike stuff. It never flavors into the planal changes, and you're not going to travel through different planes. Dell had a great session where we were involved in the ritual metamorphosis of a goblin turning into a metamorphosizing into, so there's definitely this extra planar kind of concepts in which we got kind of sucked into the vortex of this metamorphosis from a dying goblin into a worm of the earth, which was amazing. That Dell created that for us. That's not necessarily, here, right? Without it going into the otherworldly realms of visiting other planes and traveling into other planes, etc. So, but it shows you how diverse it can be and still fascinating. And it's been joy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is my favorite modern fantasy game, both because of the themes, the subject matter, the atmosphere, the art, the setting, and honestly, the player facing, and the fact that all that math stays in that D20 window. Everybody knows what they need to roll. You need to make a cunning check, Joe, with -2. My cunning is at 12. 10 and below. I got a 50% chance to nail this cunning check, right? To pick up, what's going on out there, right? So that's it, Symbaroum. Very nice. Free League, and I think Free League is one of the best companies out there currently. Modifius is a great company. Free League's phenomenal, in my opinion. Of course, these guys do the Year Zero engine, which I love. Forbidden Lands, Mutineer Zero, etc., etc. So anyway, thanks for watching. That'll be the last video I make on Symbaroum outside of our actual plays and our player recaps and GM recaps. But currently, this is it for me. This is the game that I am playing the most right now, outside of being a player in the OSC Joth campaigns with Todd. And so I can speak highly to how important this has been, and again, being a favorite game and being able to enjoy it as such. So, all right, thanks a lot, everybody out there. Have a great week. Tonight, our actual play, I am running Those Dark Places, and this will be our first experience with this particular rule book, and it's going to be great fun. And then, of course, we'll have those videos up in the next couple of days. Bye.